What's the worst experience you've had with a roommate? I let my boss crash at my second apartment about 15 years ago. It was a shitty timeshare call center where everyone did drugs and were pretty everyman types. So he and I were more friends than co-workers. Anyway, he loses his apartment and asks to stay with me for a couple months while he gets back on his feet. And I agree. He's a great dude. Kind, smart, funny, confident, and a solid around 350 pounds. I only mention the weight because it's relevant to the negative experience. So around a month into staying with us, he decides to get clean from his crippling opioid addiction. He's decided to cold turkey from a 20 a day, 10 milligram hydrocodone habit, which, for the uninitiated, is pretty intense. I advised rehab, but he elected to lie on the couch in my living room for weeks, costing him his job, sweating his ass off and shaking under a blanket. The reason why his size was relevant? He sweat a lot already and had to take pains to mitigate his body odor on normal days, with varying degrees of success. But with the withdrawals and being mostly sedentary on that textile couch for weeks, the apartment started to smell like a hot-ass forest. It was a party house with a revolving door, and people just kinda stopped coming during his tenure there. Even with my bedroom down the hall's door closed, the stench was pervasive. It wasn't his fault. I like the man, and he was trying to better himself and his life, so I put up with it. And he succeeded. Got himself a new place in the agreed time frame, stayed clean, and everything was hunky-dory. After he moved out, my actual roommate and I carried the couch to the parking lot dumpster, and it took several days to air out the smell. We even did a thermal fog with an oil-based cherry-scented counterfactant, and it still didn't help. Kinda irrelevant, but just an addendum. We stayed in touch for a while back when I still had Facebook, and he got his life together, got a good job as a realtor, lost a lot of weight, had a baby girl, found religion, or whatever. Then, after a few years of being off Facebook and radio silence, I get a call from my old roommate saying that he'd relapsed and died from a heroin overdose. Pretty fucked. R.I.P. Don. Damn, I was so excited for this guy. What a sad ending. Thanks for being a great person to him. Despite the overall outcome, at least you can be proud of the fact that you proved to be a great friend to him, and that other people would respect you for having put up with that. It sucks at the time, but you did the right thing even when it was inconvenient. Most people wouldn't have been so cool about it. Still sorry for your loss, but how you handled the situation was a real test of character. Dude kept falling asleep while smoking cigarettes. I got mad every time and woke him up. He bought me a fire extinguisher at a yard sale one day. He thought it was best joke ever. He fell asleep at night on the couch. Cigarettes rolled off onto the carpet. Carpet caught fire, couch caught fire, his shirt catches fire. He never woke up. I woke up having smelled it, grabbed his gag gift and put it all out. His shirt and hair were gone. He was okay. Never even went to the hospital. But he absolutely would have died if I hadn't been there and had that fire extinguisher beside my bed. I moved immediately. My mother used to get drunk and fall asleep with a lit cigarette. Scared the shit out of me. I used to stay up late and watch her. She never set fire to anything, but one time she must have drunkenly woken up in the middle of the night after I'd already babysat her and thought it was safe to go to bed myself. She put an egg on the stove to boil, the only thing she ever actually ate. I woke up to the smoke alarm going off and her fast asleep. She slept through the fucking fire alarm. There wasn't any actual fire, just a lot of smoke. The kitchen and lounge in that house were joined, and she was asleep on the couch, so I had to drag her limp, sleeping half-corpse outside so she wouldn't die of smoke inhalation. Luckily, she is anorexic, literally diagnosed, I'm not being crass, and about the size of a 10-year-old, so my 12-year-old arse had no trouble carrying her. She slept through that as well, and eventually only woke up because she was cold. Then she had the audacity to get mad at me for for putting her outside. Chaotic woman. Shared a quad in college with a girl named Monica. She was fine in the beginning, but then began doing things like hiding the toilet paper, trying to limit how much time we spent in the shared living room, allowing a homeless man to sleep on the sofa, and hoarded cutlery. She decided she wanted to be a vampire and had her teeth filed into points. At the end of the year, we started referring to her as Demonica. I really wonder what these people do after college because I really struggle to imagine them outside that environment. We were all in the social work program. She became pregnant in our sophomore year and dropped out. I called to ask if he had his half of the rent, and he informed me that he was on I-95, headed back to his hometown of Virginia. Dude cleared his shit out of the apartment and dipped with no warning. Had a similar thing happen years ago. I shared a house with two guys, one of them not from the country. One day he says he's going home to visit family and that he'll be back in a week. Anyway, he never returned, and one day we got a key in our mailbox. Thankfully, the landlord was understanding and gave us time to find someone new to move in before collecting the rent that month. I lived in a house with a guy who let his friend hide from the cops in our basement. The friend had shot and killed 2 people in a robbery. What the fuck? I'm assuming the guy got arrested. Did anything happen to your roommate? Yeah, he got arrested when a SWAT team kicked in the door and the roommate had to leave. The first night in the new shared apartment I was renting, my landlord slept on the floor in my living room on a rug. I thought that was weird, but I was not in a position to argue, as I really needed a place to live. Then, over the next couple of months, my landlord moved in and brought over 8 family members from Turkmenistan, including a newborn baby, and they all lived in 2 bedrooms. And by bedrooms, I mean one was the living room. When I complained, they locked me out of the apartment. I called the police, who let me in and scolded the family. It was a nightmare. I finally got out of there and never looked back. Dude killed my pet rabbit because he was jealous of the time I spent with it. Needless to say, he stopped being my roommate that day. As a rabbit owner, this makes me absolutely furious. Bunnies are wonderful creatures, and I can't imagine intentionally causing one harm. They certainly are. Thankfully, the police arrested him and told him never to come back. A roommate tried to murder my cat in front of me while I was fucked up on shrooms. I broke an unopened 1.75-liter bottle of vodka over his head, hospitalized him. Not sure that was the right course of action, and oh boy was it a shitstorm in my life. Worked out in the end. Do I wish I could have done something less brutal? Yeah, but he was 300 pounds and I was 115 or so, was gonked, and my kitty was crying for help, so I went full parent mode. Might have been wrong. I wish it could have been dealt with better, though I'm not sure there was another option. Do I feel guilty though? My beloved kitty is still with me over a decade later, so no. Freshman year of college, she came back drunk night 5 and pissed on our carpet and some of my clothes. Then, in the morning, she denied all of it despite the room smelling like piss. She would have random guys over constantly and fuck them with me in the room, even though she had a BF. She ended up getting arrested twice during the first semester. She had painkillers that were not hers, and she got a marijuana charge, LMAO. She was pure chaos and ended up in academic poor standing since she literally never went to class. The second semester, her parents required her to come home every single weekend, so it made things much nicer. I was in a motorcycle accident and spent a month in the hospital. My roommate took my rent money and spent it on cocaine. I came home barely able to walk to find an eviction notice on the door. He OD'd a couple years later. His 10-year-old son found him on their kitchen floor. He played League of Legends all night. If the game didn't go his way, he would scream in frustration and beat his fists on his desk, no matter what time of the night it was. It was difficult to get a full night's sleep with him roaring and pounding every few hours. He would also eat at his desk and broke several of the dishes I had bought for the apartment during his little tantrums. It gets worse though. Eventually, he decided that he needed to be more alert during his marathon gaming sessions. Most people would invest in coffee or energy drinks, but no, he decided he needed to buy meth. He told us he was too smart to get addicted, but at that point, I decided I'd had enough and noped on out. I took what remained of my dishes with me. I had one that would just straight up steal my stuff, one that brought home 2 rats as pets, and we ended up with 29 rats in what felt like no time at all. Lived in a house share for 7 years, so have a few stories. 2 that are tied for the worst. First was a guy who had skin issues, refused to get help, shed flakes everywhere, shower, sink, toilet. Ended up in the washing machine too when he did his washing, which ultimately ended up in everyone else's clothes when they did washing. I felt sorry for the dude, super intelligent, kind, happy, and friendly, just didn't look after himself. Second was a guy who lied about his job, never went to whatever it was, and regularly got up during the early hours to randomly scream at the top of his lungs and bang all the walls, the floor and ceiling in his room to ensure it woke everyone up. Hated the dude for this, and hated the fact he used my car as a bench when he went out to smoke. Would roll his eyes at me when I politely asked him to not sit on my car. I was in a group project with a guy who had skin issues, scabs everywhere, couldn't stop scratching. Turns out he had scabies. I got it after I put on a welding jacket he had worn. It was a terrible experience. Damn, that sucks. Luckily for us, it wasn't scabies. I think it was quite a bad form of psoriasis, but because he didn't seek treatment, he just had large white patches of flaky skin that easily brushed off. The whole house had a coating of his skin. He did eventually move out to his own place. I do occasionally chat to him online, and I believe he sorted himself out, lost a lot of weight, and got his skin sorted. He was just really dirty. His clothes were everywhere. There were old cereal bowls, just crusted and stuck. It was disgusting. But here's the real kicker. My other roommate and I had to play mom and tell him that if he didn't pick his shit up, we'd throw it all away. He didn't pick it up, so we went in there with a trash bag and started tossing everything in. When we lifted the mattress, one of those fake toy things rolled out. Then, some fluid dripped out of it. Whatever the hell came out of that thing was so rotted that it made the entire apartment smell like something had died, and the corpse was left for a few months. Clean roommate and myself had to open everything and leave for the rest of the day. The smell lingered for a few days after that. Last I heard of this dude, he was smoking a mixture of crack and heroin, then stole some oil from the back of a truck. He's been MIA since. She poisoned my food. She started out with harmless pranks like putting salt in my jello before it set. Then she put bleach in my pasta water like I wouldn't fucking smell bleach noodles. She would steal my underwear, wear them during that time of the month, and put them back in my underwear drawer unwashed. I spent years fucked up, being afraid of food and people. I already had a bad relationship with food because of my mom. This made it so I wouldn't eat at restaurants, or my friends' food they cooked to share, or eat anything that wasn't in a tightly sealed package. You should have pressed charges. It's almost a murder attempt. Bleach could have killed you. Why let people like that roam free? Imagine she has done exactly that to another person, and that person is dead or now disabled because of eating bleach. Someone does that to me, that person will get knocked the fuck out multiple times. I was very young in a very complicated life situation and wasn't even 18. I remember begging my mom to kick her out because she was living with my family and was my sister's friend. She wouldn't do anything. She told me to just live with it. I'm 30 now and would never allow anyone to treat me or anyone else I know like that. Fucking M, not her real name. The most aggressive Zen hippie you ever met. She was all sunshine and flowers until you dared to, I don't know, asked her to do her dishes or pay rent on time. Then she would be screaming in your face, and it was never her fault, oh no. Her energy was too good. It was your negative energy making her act this way. How dare you do this to her? We were all relieved when she lost her job and announced she was moving back home. But apparently, she didn't understand how a lease works until the landlord let her know she was still on the hook for rent if we couldn't find a replacement. So she started inviting creepy random guys into our home without letting the rest of us, all 20-something girls, know what was going on or who they were. At the same time, we were actively searching for a replacement. She was apoplectic when we put a stop to that plan. You were the fucking worst, Em. My best friend to this day, he decided he wanted to invite some folks over and do shrooms for the first time. I wasn't a fan of a lot of people over, but it was 4 ladies and I wasn't about to ruin a fun night for him. I was already with someone, so I planned on just staying in my room and checking in on everyone from time to time. Well, at some point, I started hearing some wild-ass sounds. I go into the living room and they had taken everything that was a circle and tossed it into a pile. Everything. I'm talking round fruits, pots and pans, lids to Tupperware, all 100 plus DVDs I had, you name it. The amount of stuff that was broken sent me into one of those rages where you go from red to just gray. I went and stayed at my girlfriend's place. The next day I get home and they were all fully naked asleep on the kitchen floor. He still apologizes to this day, and it cracks me up because it's always the same line. I still feel terrible, but man, to this day, that was the best night of my life. He was a big dude, 450 pounds big. I lived with him for a year during college. He would sometimes have 3 to 4 days off from classes and weekends, etc., and wouldn't shower at all. He would sit on his computer and just stink up the whole apartment with his BO. Just absolutely awful. I have a few, but one really stands out. I was living with 7 guys in a 4-bedroom house in San Francisco. 1 bathroom. Worst place I ever lived, covered in mold, rats everywhere, etc. Was cheap and we were broke. Was actually super fun until Jason moved in. Jason must have been on the spectrum, which I was sympathetic to, but it didn't make living with him any easier. First night, he came into the kitchen from a run wearing nothing but short shorts, grabbed my milk from the fridge, must have been half a gallon in there, chugged the whole thing straight to the dome, then put the milk back in the fridge and asked, "Is there any more milk?" Used other people's towels. When we told him this isn't an Airbnb, we each have our own towel. He stopped using a towel at all and just walked around buck naked, dripping shower water. Ranted for hours, alternating between extreme delusions of grandeur. I am the greatest financier to ever live. And extreme self-loathing. I am worth less than a cockroach. Got kicked out of his coding boot camp, presumably for behavioral reasons, so started walking around the house all day. When we would come home from work, everything would be moved around, including in our rooms. Nothing ever went missing. It was just like he's been in our rooms and tried to make us not notice. To this day, I shudder to think what he was doing in there. In the end, we took the coward's way out. The rest of us just moved together to a new house and told him the lease was ending. He was only there for a month. He moved in on the 1st and moved out on the last day of the month. He argued that since he didn't sleep in the apartment, the last day of the month he was owed rent back for that last day. We tried to explain that when you rent an apartment, you pay the entire month, and when you leave, you move out on the last day of the month. I was the master tenant at the time and wanted to just give him the $30 and be done with it, but another roommate insisted I shouldn't do that. He continued to email me for months, calling me all kinds of horrible things. My first college roommate was on the 1-semester plan. Basically, he just fucked around until the wee hours of night and never went to classes. The big issue was that he tried to go to classes. He'd set his alarm for 6 a.m. and hit snooze. When it went off again, he'd hit snooze. Over and over and over and over. Dude, just shut the fucking thing off. I shit you not. I once came home after a full day of classes and he was still hitting the snooze. Once finals came around, he was shitting bricks. I could only laugh. He shit on the carpet while making eye contact. Still a good boy though, my dog. I had a roommate that suffered from an eating disorder, which was awful for her, but what was awful for me was she would leave plates, cups, and bowls of chewed up food and or vomit all over the house. Sometimes she would try and hide it, so I'd find a plate of puke hidden under the couch because it stunk so bad. It wasn't uncommon to find puke in the sinks either. I'm not judging her. Eating disorders are no joke, and felt really bad for her, but it wasn't fun living amongst chewed up food and vomit either. My cousin and her family, they were dirty. Couldn't walk in your socks on the carpet because your feet would stick to the carpet because of all the spilled soda and beer that she never cleaned up. Her kids had lice so bad that one day I looked at the oldest girl's hair and you could see the lice running around in her hair. I lived with them for 3 months, but moved out after I saw those lice